Hi everyone, today's palette review video is going to be on the Too Faced Then and Now palette. This is also referred to as their anniversary palette because this was launched for their 20th year anniversary. So Too Faced originally launched in 1998 and it is currently 2018. So the concept behind this palette was to put out their old original shadows in a new formula, but also create new ones based on the originals. So what you have in this palette, which is, by the way, absolutely enormous, this thing is huge. You have their original 10 shades, although granted this one at the end is 2 shades, and these are all from 1998. Now they have been reformulated, so you don't have to be worried about 1998 quality in this palette, but you also have another 10 shades on the bottom. These are what they're calling the originals reinvented. So they're not exactly the same color as the original colors, but they're more inspired by the original shades. So this palette does retail for 69 Canadian or 59 US, which is a pretty good conversion. I'm happy about that. It does come in cardboard packaging that's got glitter on it, but it's not the kind that will just come off if you scrape at it. It's almost like a glazed finish. The font on the front is upraised, so it's kind of embossed into the packaging. And the backside has where this was made, which is in the US. I think it was assembled in the Dominican Republic. And the backside indicates how much shadow you're getting in here. Funnily enough, you're getting 10 shadows with 1 gram each, and you're also getting another 10 shadows with 1.25 grams each. I'm not really sure which ones in here have more, but I'm guessing it's probably some of the heavier shades down here that contain a little bit more chunky glitter type stuff. The ones that tend to be a little bit more emollient. I don't think any of the shades at the top have more than 1 gram of product, but I don't know for sure. I have mentioned before that I really like cardboard packaging, so this is a winner for me in terms of how it's kind of built. I love magnetic closures. There's a huge mirror in the top here, which you can lay it out if you want, but it will flop open, so you need to put something behind it to keep it open. So while I appreciate how this palette is constructed, I have to say this thing is way too big. I understand the concept that this is like a birthday celebration. They wanted to make something larger than life to celebrate the fact that they've been around for 20 years. But in no way, shape, or form is this a travel palette. It is way too big to bring with you on vacation. It is larger than my head. It is easily the biggest palette I have in this kind of shape. I thought my Kat Von D Metal Matte palette was bigger than this, and it's not. This one is larger than that. So for me, this is a little bit more of a showpiece for the brand. It's to showcase the fact that they've been around for 20 years, and that's especially obvious when you open the palette and you realize that there is kind of a lot of wasted space in here. They could have put these 2 rows much closer together, and I think that would have saved on space, because even now with the names printed on the inside, which is very nice, I love that, there's like at least a centimeter of space between where the word ends and where the end of the palette is. And yes, that kind of cuts into the font up here, but I think things could have been squished together a little bit. However, I do have to say, I think this is more of a celebratory palette, so I'm not sure if they were really focusing on making it compact and convenient for people. This palette does claim to have a birthday cake scent. I don't really smell that personally. If I sniff it, I smell yogurt covered raisins, which is very specific and very strange. It's not an unappealing scent, but I would never smell this and think that it smelled like a birthday cake. So the scent, I would say, is not too obtuse or offensive. It's not really in your face. And honestly, I think if you didn't know that this was scented, you might just think that that was the natural scent of an eyeshadow. So I don't feel like this is overly scented like a lot of Too Faced palettes can be. All right, I'm gonna slide in some swatches now so you can see exactly how these look like on my arm. You've seen the swatches, let's talk a little bit about the shadows, and I'm gonna have to scooch over because this palette it's just very, very large. So what do I have to say about this? Well, the first thing I have to say is I think that the original 10 shadows feel very dated, and I realize these are from 1998, so they're going to feel very dated, but shadows like Zaza, I think that's how you say that word, and Ice Queen over here feel very 1995 to 1999 for me. I had those kinds of colors in MAC shadows, and they're not a color that I would ever go back to nowadays, just because whatever I put them on, I feel like I'm 15 years old again and discovering makeup and color. So they're very weird shadows for me to use now because the paleness of them is just very bizarre. Like this pink color, I remember having that in a MAC shadow, and every time I put it on, I just looked like sickly. So this shade is it's weird for me to use. Like I feel a little bit bizarre. Today I used that through my upper crease as a transition shade because I wanted to make use of it, but I did not want to put it on my lid like I used to. So I feel like something like this becomes more of a transition color for me now. Now the blue I have used on the inner corner of my eye, and I thought it worked okay that way. But again, it's not a color that I would ever go back to putting directly on my lid because I feel like it's too 90s, or at least that was the 90s for me. I was wearing a lot of like pastel colors like this pink and this blue all over my lid, and it's not really a look I want to go back to. Another thing to point out about these original 10 shadows is that although the formula is reinvented for 2018, the fundamentals of that eyeshadow are still there. So many of these colors up here have silver glitter flecks in them that don't really adhere to your lid. They mostly just fall out and land somewhere on your cheek, so it makes them a little bit difficult to work with. The shade Pixie Dust, Dirtbag, Zaza, Trixie, and Ice Queen, oh, and the black shade from Ooh and Ah over here, all have that silver micro glitter in it. And again, that feels very dated. Now I know this is the palette that they were using to celebrate the fact that they've been around for 20 years, but I don't really like that silver glitter in my eyeshadows anymore. I feel like it's 20 years later and we've kind of moved on from that. All right, moving on to the bottom row, which is the originals reinvented. So they took inspiration from this top row and made shades that would be more like in tune with how Too Faced would produce a palette today. And I have to say, this is very Too Faced. This palette is a repetition of so many of their other palettes that they've done over the years. Like this pink here, this purple over here, and some of these mattes in here. I have that I don't know how many times over in different Too Faced palettes. So it feels very appropriate that they've put it in this anniversary palette. But if you're somebody who has a lot of Too Faced palettes, you may not necessarily need the shades in here because they are repeated from other palettes. In some cases, I feel like their inspiration color is too similar to the shade that they're sort of taking inspiration from. For example, the golds here, I feel like they're a little bit too similar. I would have wanted something a little bit different. Yes, the formula is different between the two. This one is more of a shimmer with that glitter in it, and this one is more of a foiled shadow. But fundamentally, the color is not that different. Now, they've also done it where the color is completely different. So Pixie Dust is more of a gold with silver in it, and you've got Lost Boys as their like comparative shade. Those are not the same at all. But I feel that there's a lot that is a little bit too similar in here. The kind of maroon colors are very similar. The pinks are similar. The purples are very similar. I like the concept of the originals and the reinvented ones, but I kind of wish they'd gone a little bit further and made them a little bit more different. The foiled shadows on the bottom are a little bit more difficult to work with than I was expecting, and they do behave better if you apply them with a damp brush. They look super chunky in the pan, and if you stick your finger in there or a dry brush, you'll notice right away that it kind of like it crumbles a little bit. So I opted to go in with a flat brush that was wet, and I could kind of like make a paste out of the pigment before I applied it to my eye. I preferred that a lot more because if I just stuck a dry brush in there that had like poofy bristles, it didn't really adhere as well to the brush. So anything that had that foiled shimmer texture, Glitter Donut, Lost Boys, NSFW, Reality Star, Shady Bitch, and Chill Out, I had to use them wet. I just much preferred how they behaved when I used them wet with a flat shader brush. And even then, I was concerned that with the wet brush, they were gonna go on my lids chunky, but thankfully they did not. The only shadow that I felt was actually kind of chunky was Glitter Donut. I just feel like it kind of went on my lids a little bit like it looked like flakes, which can be a nice look, but it wasn't really what I was going for. So that's just something to be aware with this shade. There are 3 matte shades in here which make me really happy. So the top row has none. They are all pretty much shimmery and most of them have glitter in them. On the bottom row you've got Gretchen, I Can't Even, and Gigi, and honestly the black over here can pretty much act as a matte color even though it is kind of more satin. I'm so appreciative that they've added matte shades in here, and they're all pretty much transition colors, which is great because I mean, makeup has changed a lot in the last 20 years and I don't think any of us were really doing transition colors back then. But now you kind of need it in order to make a cohesive eye look, so I'm really happy that they've added those in. Too Faced makes fantastic mattes. Those colors are no exception either. They are phenomenal, they're easy to blend, they're beautiful to apply, and I really, really like them. I just wish that they put more mattes in this palette. I feel like some of these darker purple colors, and well, this one's kind of blue leaning, could have been a matte or even the green, and it would have added a little bit more diversity to this palette. Another thing to point out is that there is no matte bone or cream highlight shade. I always highlight my brow bone with a matte cream shade, and there is not one in this palette. More recently, I've started to feel like that's not always necessary because we all have a lot of other palettes or single eyeshadows with that color in it. So there's not one in here, but I don't really feel like it's necessary anymore. Now that I've talked a little bit about the shadows, let's dive into the 5 looks that I created using this palette. The first look uses Gretchen in the crease and then Pixie Dust on the lid. I quite like Pixie Dust as a color. It's kind of like a greenish gold with some silver in it. It does have flecks of glitter in it, which did eventually fall out onto my cheek, but it makes for a really pretty lid shade. I also have Lost Boys on the outer corner and dragged that through the crease. This is quite a shimmery color, which is not something I tend to like on the outer corner, but because it's darker, I will sometimes put it there. Look number 2 has Gigi in the crease, and then I put NSFW on the lid. I thought this color was going to be an absolute disaster because it looked so chunky in the pan, but with a wet brush, it went on really seamlessly on the lid. You kind of have to be aware of that with some of these more foiled ones. They look like they're gonna be really bad, but if you use a wet brush, it seems to go on really nicely. So NSFW worked out really well on the lid here. I also put Temper on the outer corner and dragged that through the crease. I don't feel like Temper comes out as well on a brush as it does in a swatch. In a swatch on your finger, it feels really silky and creamy, but I feel like it kind of dusts away a little bit when you put it on with the brush. I used I Can't Even to deepen up the outer corner, but between Temper and I Can't Even, the shades are too similar, so I don't really feel like it did a whole lot. I also applied Ooh La La, the more beige champagne color, on the inner corner of my lid. Look number 3 uses Gretchen through the crease, which is a very neutral transition color. I tend to prefer a more warm toned one, but this one seems like middle of the road neutral. I then applied Glitter Donut on the lid, and this is where you can kind of see that it looks a little bit chunky. I applied it wet, but it still feels like a little bit flaky on the lid. I've got Rizzo on the outer corner, and then I tried I Can't Even to deepen it up, but that didn't really work, so I tried Ooh and Ah, but then I realized that I hate that black. It's too chalky, it's not pigmented, so I swapped to the black in Ooh La La on the base row, and that worked much better. I also used Twinkie on the inner corner. Look number 4 has Trixie through the crease and then Shady Bitch on the lid. I did, of course, use this wet. I put Villain on the outer corner, and this color looks stunning in a swatch, but I could not make it show up on top of that purple. It looks like it's got a little bit more of a red base, and I thought it was gonna make my shadow a little bit more duochrome on the outer corner, but it didn't really show up the way I wanted it to. For this look, I also decided to put Ice Queen on the inner corner because I really couldn't figure out where else to put that color because I did not want to put it on my lid. So it kind of worked out on the inner corner of my eye. It's something that I don't normally put there, but I think the shadow kind of worked out. For today's look, I have Zaza, or is that supposed to be said Jaja? Anyway, I have that pale pink color through my crease, and then I used Reality Star to deepen up the pink tone. I really wanted to have like a bright pink crease, and the two colors actually worked really well together even though they're shimmery. I really like how those came out. I then used Chill Out on the lid again with a wet brush and packed that all over. I used Ooh La La, the black color, to deepen up the outer corner just a little bit. And then I put the silver color from Ooh and Ah on the inner corner of my eye just to really brighten everything up. I did find that blending between Chill Out, the lid color, and Reality Star, the pink crease color, was a little bit difficult. When the two colors hit each other, they kind of turned a little bit brown, which I wasn't expecting because I blend pink and purple blue together all the time, but those two colors together seem to react differently than I was expecting. I just ended up going back over it with the pink color in order to make it work. I also used Chill Out to line my lower lash line, and then I used Reality Star to buff out the corners of Chill Out just to sort of make it look like a haze of pink around my eye. I really like the pink, blue, purple, and then silver color combination. I think it's a lot of fun. Alright, so final thoughts on the Too Faced Then and Now palette. I feel like this is a very Too Faced palette, which is very appropriate for the brand. I mean, you have their original 10 shades, which fine, that's what they launched back in 1998. I feel like this bottom row is a very good representation of who Too Faced is as a brand now in 2018. However, I feel like the shadow quality is not the best from them. I understand the top row has the glitter in it because that's what they had in 1998, but in 2018, I'm not loving it. I'm not a huge fan of how much brown there is, but I mean, it's hard to say like, I don't like that, but that's what they originally launched, so what else are they gonna put in this palette? I love the concept of having the original shadows and then reinventing them, but in practice, I feel like it didn't really come out that well. While I like the look that I created today, I don't feel like there's a ton of looks that I would create on the daily out of this palette. And maybe that's okay. Maybe this really is just a celebration of Too Faced, where they were and where they are now. But it's a difficult palette to recommend unless you're really interested in these colors. And even then, I don't love how the glitter is so inherent in the top row. It's really problematic to me. And on top of that, I feel like some of those colors are so dated that I would never even wear them today. If you are an avid Too Faced person, I feel like you will already have most of the shades that are in this palette. But if you're also an avid Too Faced fan, then you're gonna wanna buy this regardless. At the end of the day, I don't feel like the shadows in here are the easiest to work with, so I don't think I would actually recommend it, which is disappointing. If you're a Too Faced collector like me, you will probably pick this up regardless, but I feel like I've already got all these colors and in better formulas in different palettes over the years. So that's it for my Too Faced Then and Now palette review. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I'll catch you next time. Bye!